I wanted to try and get you to define something that you kind of lay out in some of your documents on the website, is that you lay out a difference between the golden age of capitalism and then market capitalism. So do you want to explain for people what they are and the differences between those two things?
Yes, absolutely. So in the book, I have looked at the post-war period, but from the end of the Second World War up to the year 2050 in three 35-year chunks. So the first one, 1945 to 1980, that was the golden age of capitalism. That's not my term. That's a term that was actually very well known and has dropped out of use. But many countries, including the US and the UK, had their best ever economic period. So we called it the Golden Age. Germany talked about an economic miracle. Many other countries talked about an economic miracle. In France, they talked about les Trente Glorieuses. Each country had its own phrase for it, but it was a shared experience around the global economy of unprecedented economic growth. But even more importantly than that, an unprecedented sharing of economic growth, so that normal people felt the benefit of that economic growth. And so for a normal person, that was by far the best period in terms of improvement, actually, that we've ever seen. And that was then followed, I guess we'll come into the reasons why it was followed by that in a minute, but that was then followed by another 35-year period, which is what I've called the age of market capitalism. And that period has seen a marked change, and it was looking at the data for that 35 years that made me very worried, because what we've seen over that period is a much lower rate of growth overall, which is bad news, but also it's been shared less fairly. So if you combine those two things, you've got a pie that's growing more slowly and you're sharing the pie less fairly. That means the typical person's slice, in America, for example, the American economy is vastly bigger than it was in 1980, but the typical person's slice is just about the same size. They've had virtually none of the benefit of growth, and quite a few people in the US are actually poorer than they would have been in 1980, which is extraordinary. So that's the results of those two periods. But they differ also in the underlying philosophy. So in the post-war period, the fundamental assumption was that we would try and build a world that was fit for people to live in, and the economy was a system that we would design and put in place to meet the needs of people. And it did, as I say, it did meet the needs of people extremely well for most people. It wasn't very good if you were in the top 0.01%, because you saw your share of the wealth diminishing. You were still enormously wealthy compared with a normal person, but the ratio of your wealth to their wealth was decreasing. Inequality was falling. So there was a kind of backlash that people thought, well, most people didn't, but people possessing huge amounts of capital thought, we don't want this to carry on. We don't like this. We don't think this is fair. And we should actually be shaping the economy to meet the needs of capital. And so markets are the way, you hear people use this phrase, markets are the best way to allocate resources. And what that really means is, well, we're not going to base the economy around the needs of people anymore. We're going to base it around the needs of capital. And if people aren't getting what they need out of the economy, that's because their market value is too low. So it's not that there's something wrong with the system, it's that there's something wrong with the people. And of course, the longer you do that, the more people start to suffer. And the more people, you have to say there's something wrong with them. So I don't know if you remember when Mitt Romney was running for president, he made a speech which was, for him, unfortunately leaked, where he said, 47% of Americans pay no income tax, 47% take no responsibility for their lives. So you get to the point where you're having to write off half or maybe even more than half maybe it will get to the point where you have to write off 99% of your own population as losers and wastrels and skivers and shirkers and all of these sorts of things in order to provide some kind of moral justification for what you're doing. But that's where we are. We're heading into a system where morality is defined as wealth. So if you're very wealthy, that proves that you've behaved morally because you must have created value to have been so wealthy. And conversely, if you're not very wealthy, well, that proves you've made some bad decisions somewhere along the line. And even when it comes to children, we heard in the UK, we heard Boris Johnson the other day talking about the catch-up funding, and he said that children of wealthy parents, obviously they would have private tuition, and that's right because their parents have earned that through their hard work. So there's this kind of morality that pretends that hard work and being well paid are synonymous, which of course they are not. And even blames the children or penalizes the children if their parents aren't wealthy. So there's this extraordinary confusion of wealth and morality, which comes with this market fundamentalist ideal. So the results have been demonstrably poorer, and it has a very different and rather sinister underlying philosophy and underlying objective.
Thanks for making it all the way to the end of the podcast. Don't forget our sponsor, ExpressVPN, and my book, Brexit, The Establishment Civil War, can both be found in the links in the description below. And also, please like, share, and subscribe to this podcast. It's the best way to help us grow. Until next time, thanks for listening.